Israel thinks that the toppling of Assad is great because, well, Assad is not there anymore. Assad was an ally of the Iranians. Now Assad is gone. So Israel now has this chance. It now has this green light to take territory and to occupy Syrian territory. And the Israelis were saying that it's just temporary, but now they're saying that they're not going to leave until the situation in Syria is stable. So really, it's quite obvious that they're really aiming at a permanent occupation of Syrian territory. Syria now is just being raped on all sides. It's being raped by the Israelis and it's being ravished by the Turks. Now, I remember back in the day, Al-Qaeda was the worst thing ever. They did 9/11. And when we talked about 9/11, we always talked about Al-Qaeda and how it was Al-Qaeda that butchered all those thousands of Americans in New York City on September the 11th, 2001. And now we are working with some guy who was once a major member, a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda, and we're using him as a proxy. It's quite amazing. ISIS was once seen as the worst thing ever, and now an offshoot of ISIS is seen as something that could be worked with, could be reasoned with, and it really is just quite surreal. Mohammed al-Jawlani is being presented as this man who has stated that he has distanced himself from terrorism when the reality is that he is a terrorist. And now you have Biden having direct talks with HTS, telling HTS, please don't join ISIS. And I'm here to say they are ISIS. These people are ISIS. All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about what's been going on in Syria and really how this whole idea of the war on terror really is just a farce by which to advance the interest of the American empire, but not just advancing the interest of the American empire, but also advancing the interest of aspiring empires like Turkey and Israel. Turkey wants to revive the Ottoman Empire, and Israel wants to establish Greater Israel, and they have this whole idea of bringing back Solomon's kingdom. And it really is quite amazing. You see this whole situation in Syria. It's really an absolute nightmare. You have now videos showing Syrian rebels shooting people to death, just doing executions. And it's not shocking at all because the Syrian revolution has always been evil. If you have been keeping track of the Syrian revolution, you can go all the way back to 2012, 2013. You can go all the way back to the early 2010s and you will see executions, beheadings, people getting burned alive, cannibalism even. There was a video I remember years and years ago showing some Syrian rebel eating a guy's heart. It was either his heart or his liver. This was the Muslim version of Hannibal Lecter. And this was really at the beginning of the Syrian revolution. You saw it right there. Cannibals. And you had Al-Qaeda. You had all of these lunatics right there at the beginning of the Syrian revolution. The Syrian revolution was always dominated by Islamic fundamentalism, always dominated by jihadists, always dominated by terrorists. And so Bashar al-Assad, he was fighting terrorists. That's who he was fighting. He was fighting ISIS. He was fighting these lunatics. He was fighting Jabhat al-Nusra. He was fighting Al-Qaeda. But he was portrayed as being a member of this axis of terror. And so they said Bashar al-Assad, he is a part of this axis of terror. He is supporting terrorism. He's supporting Hezbollah. So we have to take him down. In the name of fighting terrorism, we have to take him down. So what was the solution of NATO? Support more terrorism. Support terrorists. That was the solution of NATO. Support terrorists. Support Sunni terrorists. Support Al-Qaeda. Support the Muslim Brotherhood. And that has been the solution of NATO. So why do they support terrorism? They say that we have to fight terrorism. But then when they start fighting terrorism, they actually start supporting terrorism. They start arming terrorists. They start funding terrorists. They start giving support, logistical support for terrorists. They're just plain evil. But this is the reality. The whole idea of the war on terror is a farce. It is always just a narrative by which to advance the interest of empire. So they support the terrorists, and then when the terrorists cause enough chaos, they then use the existence of the terrorists to justify militarist expansionism. So Israel, for years, has been talking against Bashar al-Assad, doing military actions against Syria, saying that Bashar al-Assad has to go because he is an evil tyrant who supports terrorism. And the narrative against Bashar al-Assad is that Syria will be so much better without him. And they were talking about how they wanted a Syria free of Bashar al-Assad, and they talked about how they wanted a free Syria. They wanted a liberated Syria. But as soon as they liberated Syria, quote unquote, liberated Syria from Bashar al-Assad, immediately after Assad was toppled, Israel began to invade Syria. They began to invade it, and now the IDF is just 15 miles away from Damascus. And Turkey has been advancing itself militarily within Syria, and they're going to advance themselves even more. They're going to advance themselves even more now that Bashar al-Assad has been toppled. So what the hell happened to a free Syria? Where is this free Syria that you guys have been talking about? It never was about a free Syria. It was always about conquering Syria, taking it over, and controlling it as a way to use Syria as a weapon against Russia, as a weapon, or really as a proxy against Iran and also against Russia. And this really is a war between Turkey and Russia. It's been a proxy war for a long time, but eventually there's going to be an actual clash between Russia and Turkey. I'm not saying that it's going to happen tomorrow, but it eventually will happen because Turkey wants to revive its Ottoman Empire. It wants to control Syria, but Russia has a very important naval base in the area of Tartus on the Syrian coast, and Russia wants that access into the Mediterranean. And Turkey controls the Dardanelles, it controls access into the Black Sea, it controls access into the Mediterranean, and Russia does not want to have to depend on Turkey for access into the Mediterranean, so it needs Syria to have that access way. And so if Turkey wants to control all of Syria, that is going to clash with the interest of Russia, and eventually there's going to be an actual war between the two countries. But the United States understands that Russia and Turkey are historical enemies, and so NATO sees Turkey as the perfect proxy against the Russians because Turkey is a heavily armed country. It is a militarily very innovative and advanced country. It is the second most armed country in the NATO alliance. And so NATO sees Turkey as the perfect proxy to put into Syria to act as a bulwark, to act as really a guard against Russia or against Iran. So NATO is allowing Turkey to expand itself in Syria. Israel thinks that the toppling of Assad is great because, well, Assad is not there anymore. Assad was an ally of the Iranians. Now Assad is gone, so Israel now has this chance. It now has this green light to take territory and to occupy Syrian territory. And the Israelis were saying that it's just temporary, but now they're saying that they're not going to leave until the situation in Syria is stable. So really, it's quite obvious that they're really aiming at a permanent occupation of Syrian territory. So Syria now is just being raped on all sides. It's being raped by the Israelis, and it's being ravished by the Turks. The Turks want to use the chaos caused by terrorism in Syria to justify further military expansion, and this is all about reviving the Ottoman Empire. And so this whole idea of fighting against terrorism, it's just a giant farce because for years Israel was supporting Syrian rebels. For years, and you can look into this yourself, you will see that Israel was supplying food to Syrian rebels, really terrorists. Israel was giving money. Israel was giving a lot of support for Syrian rebels. And the majority of the Syrian rebels that Israel was supporting were members of Jabhat al-Nusra. And Jabhat al-Nusra right now is known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which is the most dominating terrorist group right now in Syria. It is the most dominating revolutionary group in Syria right now. It has been the face of the Syrian revolution, and the leader of HTS, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is Mohammed al-Jalani, and Mohammed al-Jalani is now the face of revolutionary Syria. This is a guy who was a member of al-Qaeda. He was working directly with ISIS, but now he's seen as something that's great, or something that can potentially be worked with. It's quite amazing. ISIS was once seen as the worst thing ever, and now an offshoot of ISIS is seen as something that could be worked with, could be reasoned with, and it really is just quite surreal. Mohammed al-Jalani is being presented as this man who has stated that he has distanced himself from terrorism, when the reality is that he is a terrorist. And now you have Biden having direct talks with HTS, telling HTS, please don't join ISIS. And I'm here to say they are ISIS. These people are ISIS. Now, what are the crimes of Jabhat al-Nusra? What's the record of Jabhat al-Nusra? Well, I'll tell you what, it's nothing good. For years, we were posting on the crimes of Jabhat al-Nusra in our website, shubat.com, and I looked at our older posts about al-Nusra, and I found several stories that were just absolutely horrifying. So, for example, in one story, a bunch of Jabhat al-Nusra guys spent hours gang raping a 60-year-old woman and then murdered her. And then in another story, Jabhat al-Nusra guys overtook a Christian man and they crucified him because he was a Christian.
بعد شي يومين بنتفاجأ بصوته على النت بأنه مصلوب وكاتبين على الجنب جبهة النصرة إنه مهدور دمه لأنه بيحمل قلادة مسيحية.
يعني لبس صليب.
إيه صليب، لابس صليب.
حبيبي جابها ورجع أول صليب. ضلينا 3 أيام ما قدرنا نجيبه. اجانا تليفون انه كمال مرشوق على الرصيف هونيك محل الحادث. لحتى نهار راح ابني طلع بالسيارة وراح خاطر بنفسه لحتى يشوف أخوه، لقوه حاطينه على الرصيف هيك مسلوب مثل المسيح. يا حبيبي
في ضياع كانوا لما يفيقوا الصبح يلاقوا أولادهم الصغار بناتهم مقطعين ومحطوطين قدام بيوتهم، وكان في معهم شريط فيديو بيأرجي قد ايه مدى اغتصاب هدول الناس، مدى تقطيعهم وتعذيبهم.
And then in another story, they did a whole massacre of a bunch of Druze people, just butchered them like they were cattle in a slaughterhouse. I mean, these people are absolutely evil. They are ISIS. These people are ISIS, but they're saying, oh no, HTS has distanced itself from those terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Maybe they can be worked with, maybe they can be reasoned with. These people are absolute demons. And these NATOist propagandists, they know the bullshit. They know these people are terrorists, but they don't care because they are simply mouthpieces who are there to push narratives for the advancement of the NATO agenda. It really is that simple. Mohammed al-Jalani, if you look at his history, I mean, he was working directly with ISIS. He was working directly with the leader of ISIS, Mr. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and he founded Jabhat al-Nusra as the official Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. Now, I remember back in the day, Al-Qaeda was the worst thing ever. They did 9/11, and when we talked about 9/11, we always talked about Al-Qaeda and how it was Al-Qaeda that butchered all those thousands of Americans in New York City on September the 11th, 2001. And now we are working with some guy who was once a major member, a high-ranking member of Al-Qaeda, and we're using him as a proxy. Now, is this because America loves Muslim terrorism? No, America doesn't give a damn about these people. These people are just, they're just cogs in the machine. They are simply seen as tools, simply seen as proxies. But NATO uses these people because NATO wants to use them as proxies to defeat NATO's enemies. In this case, it was Bashar al-Assad. These terrorists are being used to destabilize Syria, so Turkey can be presented as this force for order, so that Turkey can then justify itself going into Syria even more militarily to take territory. And Turkey is going to be presented as the great hero. It's already being presented as this country that could be used to take control over Syria. And that's what's going to happen. Turkey is going to take control over Syria. Now, Turkey is initially going to be using its proxies, as it already has been, but eventually Turkey is just going to take control over Syria, and it's going to be a revival of the Ottoman Empire. Now, Israel has been quite happy with the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. Israel has been saying this is a great thing. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu stated quite proudly that Israel played a direct role in the toppling of Bashar al-Assad by striking Hezbollah, which really cut Bashar al-Assad off from a major ally, and also by wounding or devastating Iran in a war in Lebanon by killing major Iranian officials and also killing major members of Hezbollah who were proxies of Iran. And so by cutting Syria off, by cutting Assad off from his Iranian/Lebanese allies, it greatly weakened Bashar al-Assad, thus enabling the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. But really the biggest blow was Bashar al-Assad losing his Russian support, because Russia is so occupied with the war in Ukraine. Russia said, listen, we really can't help you that much anymore. The writing is on the wall. You're going to have to leave. Bashar al-Assad fled. He is now in Russia. But Netanyahu did a speech boasting about how Israel played a direct role in toppling Bashar al-Assad. And Israel is very happy with this, because now Iran is weakened heavily, and now Iran has lost its bridge. Syria was Iran's bridge by which to transport weapons into Lebanon to arm Hezbollah. So the Israelis are happy about this. You have all of the Israeli trolls online praising the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. And the Israelis are very arrogant. They think that they can contain the Islamist rebels. They think that they can control the problem. But the reality is that Turkey is coming, and the revived Ottoman Empire is coming. And Syria shares a border with Israel. And so once Syria becomes a part of the revived Ottoman Empire, you're going to have this revived Ottoman Empire right next door to you. And this is a country, Turkey is a country that has for years talked about going to war with Israel, starting a war with Israel to defend the Palestinians. And so I could totally see one day Israel going into war in, let's say, Gaza, or fighting against Palestinians, and then killing a whole bunch of Palestinian civilians, and then Turkey saying, Israel, we are going to go to war with you to defend the Palestinian people, and we are right next door. And at that point, this revived Ottoman Empire is going to be right next door, smack right next door to Israel, with direct access into Israel. And so what we're actually seeing is the road to the next Holocaust being paved, because eventually what's going to happen is the Ottomans, the revived Ottomans, the Neo-Ottomans, are going to enter Israel, and they're going to commence and orchestrate the next Holocaust. So Israel is laughing right now, but I assure you that they're not going to be laughing in the future when they have to face a revived Ottoman power. And I think at that point, NATO or the United States is going to say, listen, we wash our hands from the whole situation. We're not going to get involved. It's not our problem. And they're just going to allow it to happen. And it's going to be an utter nightmare. So what we're doing is we're actually just creating a monster. We are creating a Leviathan. But this is what we do. We create Leviathans, and we support terrorists in the name of fighting some other problem. So, for example, we really want to topple the Ayatollah regime in Iran. We want to topple the Khamenei. The Khamenei is the big bad guy. So we are supporting the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Khalq Iran, or the People's Mujahideen of Iran. This is a terrorist organization, and it was officially designated as a terrorist organization by the United States because the MEK has made attacks against Americans. But what happened eventually? The Americans said, oh, they're not terrorists anymore. The same thing with the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. For years, the Azov Battalion was designated as a far-right Nazi group, and the American government said that no weapons would be sent to Azov Battalion because Azov are Nazis. And then what happened after Russia invaded Ukraine? That ban was lifted, and now it's okay to give weapons to Nazis. What was happening during the Cold War? The United States government was providing weapons, and various NATO intelligence agencies were providing weapons and training for far-right groups, neo-Nazi groups, ultra-nationalist thugs in Europe, and it was all done in the name of fighting the Soviet Union. This was after the Second World War. So in the Second World War, the Nazis were the bad guys, and then in the Cold War, all of a sudden the Nazis were allies. They were the good guys, and we were streamlining all of these Nazi scientists into the United States, giving them big fat annual salaries to work with NASA and to work with the US military, and it was all done in the name of fighting the Russians. So everything is circumstantial, everything is based on the circumstances around us. Nothing is based on principles, nothing is based on morals. So when they start using axioms or start using tropes like the war on terror, what they are really saying is we're going to fight terrorists by supporting other terrorists, or we're going to go against some enemy by supporting terrorists, and then if the terrorists become too much to handle, we'll just say, oh, we're going to fight these other terrorists who were actually our allies at one point in time. Case in point, there is an article that you can see from the 1990s, and it shows a picture of Osama bin Laden, and the headline actually portrays Osama bin Laden as a man of peace. So Osama bin Laden was once portrayed as a man of peace, and then all of a sudden he became the worst person in the world. The same thing goes with this Mohammed al-Jalani guy who was running HTS. Mohammed al-Jalani was officially designated as a terrorist in 2013. And then in 2018, the United States government put out a $10 million reward for Mohammed al-Jalani. Yeah, they put a $10 million bounty on Mohammed al-Jalani's head. And now they're wondering, the U.S. government is debating on whether or not they should just lift the bounty and just throw the bounty out, because now the U.S. government is working directly with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is just an offshoot of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Oh, at one point in time, Al-Qaeda was the worst thing ever, but now an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization that has roots in Al-Qaeda, is now seen as something that could potentially be worked with. I mean, it's just, the whole thing is surreal. Meanwhile, we are seeing videos of people being butchered by the Syrian rebels, but this is A-okay because we got rid of Bashar al-Assad. And now we're just creating a monster, we're creating a giant Leviathan in the Middle East, and we are going to see this monster with its full, horrifying, harrowing face, and then we're just going to shrug our shoulders and say, oh, another monster that America created. And that is the horrifying reality that we live in. And that's it. Those are my thoughts. The Syrian revolution is evil. It has always been evil. It was evil from its very inception. And now we're seeing it just show its second face, its new face with Assad gone. And it's just going to be more chaos that will be used by the Turks to justify furthering itself militarily. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.